Part 20. Infinite Doomsday Start Draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Aichiji. Chapter 191. I know, Tia's face turned serious. She was finally convinced by Ruger and made up her mind. Google search reading. After slightly adjusting the muzzle position, she pressed the tank main gun firing button again. Boom. The tungsten alloy rod pierced the chest of the bloody countess on the tip of the slanted spear like a steel needle. This time, it really pierced through the heart. At the same time, Ruger also heard a series of prompts from the system. Kill the undead demon bloody countess leader nightmare level, get 450 points. Before he could sigh that this thing actually gave such a high kill score, he saw another set of messages behind the system panel. Mission target, kill the bloody Countess Mary and destroy her underground nest, completed. Mission reward, 4,000 points, obtained. The last and highest rewarding task in Ruger's hand was actually completed like this. The points capped at 4,000 were all sent to Ruger's wallet. The points provided by these two items alone are almost catching up with the ones left in his wallet. When the two are added together, his wallet balance has really broken through the 5-digit mark. He has been earning points quickly recently, but his expenses are also increasing. The ammunition used by the advanced weapons that are commonly used now is a considerable expense. Now with these 4,450 points, according to the purchasing power calculation, it is about 4,450 x 100 equal 445,000 equal $4.45 million US. This is converted into RMB and thrown back to the main plane, and a 3-bedroom and 1 living room apartment in a second-tier city has also been released. It's a pity that Ruger is no longer an ordinary person now. The way he spends money is more like a mercenary, or even a small warlord. Although this money is not small, it is still not enough to buy a decent third-generation main battle tank. After all, it is rumored that the official price of a Leopard 2A6 is at least $3 million US. However, Ruger already has the raw materials of 5 Leopard 2A4s, and he can use them normally by spending a few thousand points. And this is just a drop in the bucket of Ruger's trophies. So in the end, the most valuable thing on him now is the logistics space full of various raw materials, and the points that have just exceeded 5 digits can only be regarded as a fraction. The former is his fixed assets, and the latter is just his working capital. Receiving a huge sum of money naturally makes people feel uncontrollable joy. However, Ruger still calmed himself down from the ecstasy through the brain supplementing adjustment method. That is, through the metaphor of fixed assets and working capital, he hinted to himself that these 4,450 points are just a small amount of money for him, so he should not fan Jin Zongju. After all, he has more important things to do right now. For example, how to deal with Blood Crow Sarah, who was about to subdue the bloody countess as her new pet, who was cut off from the bottom of his fire. The green countess on the tip of the spear was shot through the heart by Tia, and the countess's vital signs disappeared instantly. However, after being shot in the face, Sarah did not show any sign of being angry. She opened her helmet visor and turned to look at Ruger and other personnel with an amusing smile on her face. As the countess was shot through the heart by Tia, the dark gun shooters who were scattered all over the playground and were gathering here were stagnant. After they started to move again, although they still gathered in the direction of Ruger and others, their speed was obviously much slower. As for the lightly armed Mercedes-Benz G-Series cars whose cabs could not be seen, and the lightly armored Raccoon-style light armored patrol cars based on it, they also stopped at the same time. Even the machine guns on the rooftop remote control weapon station stopped and no longer moved. Although these dark gun shooters have decent skills in using guns, they are dogmatic. They can shoot from behind cover, lie on the ground and shoot in a prone position, or stop and shoot in a kneeling or even standing position, but they must adjust to a perfect position before any shooting. In this way, although their accuracy is good, the shooting frequency is very low. However, because of their presence, Ruger did not dare to jump off the tank directly. He still stood in the cockpit, adjusted the movable mount to a standing position, popped his head out of the cockpit roof, and looked at Sarah from a distance. Tia in the turret actually wanted to stick her head out to explain to her sister Sarah. However, because of the previous slow encounter, she was left in the gunner position by Ruger. After all, the firing of the tank's main gun requires her gunner. Ruger saw that Sarah was not angry, but looked at him with a smile, and he felt a sudden pang in his heart. He was not afraid that Sarah would scold him angrily. He has already got what he wanted, and the benefits have been obtained. He can use the empty things on the surface. For example, he can apologize sincerely. Anyway, it doesn't cost money, so it's okay to blow more rainbow farts. But if Sarah is not angry, this matter will be difficult to deal with. After all, Ruger doesn't care how he treats Sarah, but he needs to consider Tia's thoughts. And such a Sarah will make Tia prefer her in her heart. Ruger opened his mouth slightly embarrassedly, not knowing what to say for a moment. Unexpectedly, Sarah rolled her eyes at him coquettishly and chuckled, "Why, are you afraid that I will subdue this thing and bring it back to Rogue Town, but accidentally let it go out of control and release its mass destruction magic to destroy Rogue Town?" Ouch. She actually knew. Ruger was even more surprised when he heard this, thinking that she heard him and Tia gossiping. But except for Anya and the old noisy guy who flashed in and out of the car from time to time, no one else heard those words. With the volume of the two people just now, I'm afraid that even Anya didn't hear it clearly. How did she know? No, she shouldn't have heard it from me. She said I'm afraid Rogue Town will be destroyed, and when I discussed with Tia, I said Rogue Front. So, she was prepared for it? She knew that her behavior just now would cause others to worry. Yes, this is a reasonable explanation. But if that was the case, why did she do that? Thinking of this, Ruger simply admitted his previous thoughts openly and immediately said that he was judging others by one's own meanness. Then, while Sarah was scolding him, he asked back, "If you don't want to subdue it, why do you still release the Radom worm to control it?" Ruger's timing of this chain palm was indeed very good. Not to mention blocking Sarah's rhythm of continuing to put pressure on him through scolding, the innocent girl in the turret who had been persuaded by Sarah and wanted to crawl out to apologize was also blocked. However, the timing is one thing, and the power of this move itself is another. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 192. Since Sarah had already considered the previous questions, she could not have been unprepared for the next question that would naturally be asked. She immediately answered with a smile. Actually, I want the memory and knowledge in its brain. For example, how to use your tank. Searched can on Google. Memory, knowledge, Ruger thought for a moment and suddenly realized, you mean, you can obtain the memory of the individual controlled by your pet through your pet. Yes, Sarah nodded, but the brain of the controlled individual must be developed enough. Beasts and other things have only animal desires in their minds, which is meaningless. As she said that, she flashed Lugger again with her charming eyes. Actually, I want to see what secrets are in someone's mind. If you learn to drive a tank from him, you will definitely get faster. However, if I do that, someone will feel bad. I can't bear to do it. Then we can only use this guy's memory to make up the numbers. Sarah turned her head and looked at the bloody countess corpse on the tip of the spear. I hope we can recover enough information for use. This. Being hit by Sarah's words that matched her body language, Lugger was really a little stuck and didn't know what to say. It seemed that Sarah took the initiative to say what he wanted to know and what he had doubts about. But if he thought about it carefully, his doubts were not dispelled. For example, Sarah said that her pet Radom bug could gain access to the memory and even knowledge of the person being controlled. but it requires the person being controlled to have a sufficiently developed brain. In other words, it must be an intelligent host. So, it seems that demonized beasts and undead creatures are not allowed, but demons and even humans should be considered, right? So, does Sarah already know a lot about the memory knowledge in the monster's mind? Has she conducted experiments on humans? Although her joking tone seemed to imply that she had also thought about using this method to explore Ruger's memory, it seemed that it was because of Tia that she did not do it. She said this obviously because she wanted to say that this was just a joke, and she used this joke to dispel the doubts of Lugger and others. But the problem is, just the fact that she can think of this is scary enough. The fact that she was joking like this meant that she had already thought about it. If conditions allowed, would she really not do it? There is one more important thing, which is why Lugger has always been vaguely wary of Sarah. That is, how did she tame that Radham bug into a pet? Is it relying on her own abilities? Relying on the Nephilim power system of Rog and even the Amazon female warriors? But Lugger went through all the relevant information and found no technique that the Amazon female warrior had mastered that had such an effect. Most likely, it is nothing more than 2 skills. 1 bait. 2 Valkyrie. The previous skill, riding lure, can be completely read as shadow clone technique. The effect is also similar, illusion-like clone technique. The latter is to summon a Valkyrie spirit to help him fight. In the background setting, this skill is more like a divine spell, a blessing from a god named Atholiua in the Amazon faith. In addition, there is nothing in the Amazon female warrior's power system that allows Sarah to subdue pets. Although as the Dark World shattered and the fragments fell on the world of the lost, the surviving humans with Nephilim blood did not completely follow the rules. When learning the inherited power system, they would create their own unique mutations from time to time. Ability. For example, the Ice Mage Anya's continuous ice ball magic is her own creation. But this ability to recreate is, on the one hand, a mutation of some kind of original magic. Sarah mutated her ability to summon Valkyrie spirits into a pet? Or did she simply let the summoned Valkyrie heroic spirit replace the main consciousness of Radham bug? It seems that this is indeed a feasible way. But this is just Ruger's speculation. If he doesn't get conclusive evidence, he will continue to be vigilant day by day. Soon, under the gaze of everyone, the Radham bug finally jumped out from the corpse of the bloody countess. After taking 2 steps along the spear, it simply slid down like a slide. When it was about to approach Sarah, it flashed and disappeared. At the same time, Sarah seemed to be immersed in her own thoughts and stopped talking. Upon seeing this, Lugger vaguely guessed that she was probably reading the information collected by the Naradama bug, so he stopped staring at her and turned to look at the surrounding battlefield. Then, I saw the dark gun shooters who were still fighting trench warfare without trenches, and the Rog girls who formed a 4-person firepower team and harvested them with tactical moves superior to those of decades. This military camp is a ruins of the lost and is not infected by magic energy, so the dark gun shooters have fallen from the nightmare level to the quasi-nightmare level. Rogs 2G3 plus 1 HK21 plus 1 HK417, 4 guns can kill a dark gun shooter in one salvo. So while fighting the enemy on Lugger's side, they also slowly advanced from the initial factory building on the west side of the playground to the northeast section of the middle side. Seeing them approaching slowly, and not being at a disadvantage in the face of those scattered monsters, Lugger rolled his eyes, simply called them to protect their commander, and then started the tank again and drove to the east. He did not forget that there were 3 PZH-2000 self-propelled howitzers whose AI cores were completely eaten up by Lao Zhao. PZH is the abbreviation of the German word Panzerhaubitze, Panzer plus Haubitze equals armored howitzer, which literally means armored howitzer. Their 52 caliber Rheinmetall 155 mm howitzer is one thing in the hands of a ghost or a monster, but it is another thing in Lugger's hands. Lugger has almost played with the old 88 guns in World War II. If he gets this modern 155mm large caliber howitzer, he may not be able to come up with many new tricks. If Tia and Minerva were to be brought in to take charge of one gun each and provide long-range firepower coverage, who among the monsters on the ground could withstand their 60-round attack? The normal firing rate of this thing is only 10 rounds per minute, and it takes 2 minutes for 3 guns to hit one round. If it were on a modern battlefield with equal strength, it would be difficult to have such a stable performance time. But here, it would be too easy to bully monsters without long-range firepower support. However, this thing, like the Leopard 2 series tanks, uses a large number of electronic systems. How to make them usable in an environment with extremely strong magic radiation is a big problem for Ruger. In the past, he only had the old guys from World War II, and the problem of magic radiation did not affect him much. Now the high-end goods in his hands directly skip the Cold War level and enter the level of the first-line modern mechanical forces in the 21st century. This problem seems to be very necessary to solve. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 193. Nuclear radiation can still be dealt with by 3 defense devices. Electromagnetic pulses can be shielded by devices based on the principle of Faraday cages. Ruger didn't believe that he couldn't find a way to deal with magic radiation. Google search reading. Following the real murderer Lao Guozhao back to the crime scene, Ruger quickly took the 3 trophies back to the logistics space. As his total assets exceeded 10,000 points, as the system had said, he was given a variety of permissions. One of them was the expansion of the logistics space. If he wanted to recycle the 3 PZH-2000 self-propelled howitzers at this time, he could only recycle them into raw materials and turn them into discount coupons, and then use the discount coupons to buy them back from the system store later. After all, he didn't have much parking space in his space before, and it was completely full after putting in 4 Leopard 2A4s. However, the full system price of a PZH-2000 is at least $8 million. Even if the system store gave him a 30% discount for the first time, he would have to spend 24,000 points to afford it. If you don't want to spend such a high price, you have to restore it part by part and assemble it yourself. The ability of Ruger's logistics space to make things is already unscientific, but if it is to build such a complex system engineering, it is impossible without 10 days or half a month. It's good to be able to upgrade. Thinking about this, Ruger finally sighed and said with emotion, "Now the parking spaces in the logistics space have more than doubled, and there is still room for 6 tanks and 6 self-propelled howitzers. Of course, considering that the chassis of the PZH-2000 self-propelled howitzer originally used the mature Leopard 1 tank chassis, the size of the 2 generations of Leopard chassis is not much different, so it is actually unnecessary to count them separately, that is, 12 Leopard tank chassis can be placed." Ruger returned to Sarah with satisfaction and found that Sarah, who was wearing iron armor, was still motionless. However, her spear had been put away, and the visor on the helmet was closed again. The other 4 Rajas were scattered around her in a small circle. Each person was responsible for a fan-shaped shooting range, and the shooting ranges overlapped with each other. In the end, 2 people were responsible for one direction. At this time, they were lying on the ground in a standard prone position holding guns, shooting with great success. However, when Ruger saw that, he knew that they probably needed help. It didn't matter whether the MP5 girl cooperated with the G36 girl on the left or the HK417 sister on the right, because she was facing due east and was responsible for the direction with the least number of enemies. But the HK21 sister behind her was in charge of the due west direction, which was miserable. Now everyone was in the middle of the giant playground with the east-west direction as the long side, close to the east and north. So there were the least enemies coming from the east and north sides, slightly more enemies from the south, and the direction with the most enemies was the west side. Probably because of this, when the 4 people assigned tasks, the 2 holding the G3 were responsible for the northeast and the south, and the HK-417 was responsible for the south. And the one holding the general-purpose machine gun HK-21 was responsible for the west side with the most enemies. In addition, the dark gun shooters were very slow, so Miss HK-21 could still hold on for the time being. However, as the dark shooters in the distance got closer and closer, the main enemies that had once pressed to the west also slowly approached. Once these dozens of monsters gathered together entered their range of operation, it would be difficult for Miss HK-21 to suppress them with just her firepower. Seeing this, Ruger simply turned the steering wheel to the left and drove west. Tia, help them solve it. Okay. Tia hadn't fought for a long time, and she was so idle that she almost fell asleep. At this time, she heard Ruger calling for artillery support, and immediately moved the muzzle over and pressed the fire button hard. Anya wanted to stop it, but before she could say anything, it was too late. Tia also waited until the shell flew out before she realized that it was actually an armor-piercing shell. She couldn't help but smile and said in an overly cute tone, "Sorry, I hit the wrong one." Anya couldn't help but roll her eyes when she heard this, and she was a little disdainful of her old rival who had even learned to act cute now. But she still quickly and professionally pulled out a multi-purpose high-explosive shell from the ammunition rack and pushed it into the barrel. "Okay," Anya shouted subconsciously, but found that her voice also unconsciously became cute, and it sounded exactly the same as Tia's tone just now. This accident made Anya cough twice subconsciously, and she also awed from time to time, looking for her original clear and cold tone. However, when she heard her actually say something coquettish, Tia laughed out loud. "Hate it, why are you imitating others' way of speaking?" "How can I imitate your way of speaking?" "Don't talk nonsense," Ruger simply added at this time. For a moment, the tank was filled with a cheerful atmosphere. At the same time, Tia didn't listen at all, and continued to fire high-explosive bombs one after another. Soon, the monster army on the west side of the playground was smashed to pieces. The killing area of the DM-11 multi-purpose high-explosive bomb is not large, but because it uses tungsten alloy balls as part of the fragments, the damage effect is far stronger than ordinary fragmentation bombs. Especially when dealing with quasi-nightmare monsters, which have much stronger defense than ordinary human bodies, it shows its extraordinary power. This thing is also a high-explosive bomb in principle, but it also has enough anti-light armor capabilities. Ruger has been fighting in the dark world for a long time, and he can slowly get used to it. The defense of ordinary monsters here can be regarded as ordinary infantry. Even if the elite monsters are elite infantry wearing bulletproof armor, the defense of nightmare-level monsters can be regarded as light armor. Maybe one day in the future, he will encounter hell-level monsters, and he may find that their defense is almost equivalent to heavy armor units, such as main battle tanks. So he only needs to use weapons against light armor units to fight nightmare-level monsters, and he rarely needs to reload the second round. For example, his 30mm caliber rapid-fire cannon, and this DM-11 multi-purpose grenade. After just a few shots, Tia was still deliberately using her previous coquettish voice to ask Anya to continue reloading, but Anya was stunned for a long time before muttering, "Ammunition, all used up." "What? It's all used up after just a few shots?" Tia stopped being coquettish this time, and subconsciously switched back to her fiery and sunny tone. However, Ruger thought about it and nodded slowly. "It's possible. This car is designed to have a total of 42 rounds of ammunition, but there are only 15 rounds of space on the ammunition rack in the rear compartment of your car, Anya. The remaining 27 rounds are in the ammunition room below you, to the left of my cockpit. I guess the ammunition on this car is not full." With the way you just shot, Tia, you have only just used up the multi-purpose bullets, which means that the monsters have a lot of ammunition left. What? This car has so little ammunition, it's not enough to fight. Tia pouted, ran back to the commander's seat, opened the top door, stuck her head out, pulled out the low-speed grenade launcher in her small bag, and blasted the remaining monsters. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 194. However, the low-speed grenade used against infantry is not very effective against monsters with defenses equivalent to light armor units. Brother Lu, give me my launcher back. Tia was unhappy with the explosion and remembered the high-speed grenade launcher that Lugger had taken away for temporary safekeeping. Because of its large size, Lugger's own Iron Man armor was put in the logistics space. The launcher is gone. Lugger also knew what she meant and said immediately, but there are a lot of other things that can deal with these guys. I sent them to you. Tia had just pouted her lips, but when she heard that new ammunition was sent, she immediately turned into joy and happily took out the remote store terminal block and took out a grenade with a circle of the same warhead tied around it. What is this? Cluster grenades, large quantity, full, throw it. Lugger smiled. Upon hearing this, Tia immediately pulled the fuse of the grenade in the middle and threw these 3 or 4 pineapple bomb-sized grenade at the monster. Boom! The explosion of the central grenade immediately triggered the explosion of the surrounding explosives, and they exploded into a cloud of dust in the air. The violent blast wave of the explosion of so many explosives at the same time, coupled with several times the fine fragments, exploded and scattered there, and immediately took away 3 or 5 monsters within a few meters around. Also, it can be used like this. Tia was so smart that she immediately drew inferences from the use of this thing and guessed that her pineapple should also be used in this way, and she couldn't help but get excited. Seeing that she was satisfied with the explosion, Ruger finally breathed a sigh of relief. There is a thing called morning mood, which means that some people will be extremely irritable when they get up if they don't get enough sleep. Things that he usually doesn't care about can also make him extremely angry, and he may lose his temper at any time. What is the smallest thing that can trigger his temper? Maybe a simple good morning can set off an explosion. What's good about that? You're such a jerk. Well, in Ruger's opinion, Tia also has a similar problem of getting angry when she wakes up, which he calls explosive gas. If this lady gets addicted to random explosions and you don't satisfy her addiction enough, she will be like getting angry when she wakes up, with a bad temper and flaming up at the slightest provocation. This happened one day when we were building the second shelter. How irritable was Tia? When she was eating, she felt that the meat didn't taste good, so she directly fired 4 or 5 big bombs at the roast beef. A good piece of roast beef was not only burnt black, but also torn into pieces by the explosion fragments. Since then, Ruger has deliberately prevented Tia's explosive gas from happening again. Once he finds that she hasn't had enough of the addiction to pouring out firepower, he will definitely help her make up for it. She just likes explosions, and Ruger can afford it. He just breathed a sigh of relief when he heard Anya exclaiming, "The ammunition racks in front are all empty." Ruger's heart couldn't help but tighten again when he heard this. Fortunately, after hearing this, Tia didn't become manic due to unsatisfied desire as Ruger worried, but curled her lips calmly and said, "If there is no, then there is no, it doesn't matter." As soon as the voice fell, another cluster grenade was thrown into the group of monsters and exploded. Fortunately, Ruger secretly wiped his cold sweat and thought that he had done the right thing by sending out the cluster grenade just now. He just came back to his senses and found Anya behind him hesitating, as if he wanted to say something but stopped, so he hurriedly asked her what was wrong. Unexpectedly, Anya asked very depressedly, "Then, what should I do now?" "Huh? What to do? Isn't it good to rest if there is nothing to do?" Ruger thought about it and knew that Anya had a habitual restlessness and felt guilty and uncomfortable when she was idle. This disease is common in some people who follow the rules too much. His team might as well be called mental patients with many troubles. Ruger shook his head and said to Anya, "Open the hatch and go up to use the MG3 there." MG3, the general-purpose machine gun that Ruger has the most, uses NATO standard bullets. This is also a general-purpose machine gun for defense in the Leopard 2 series. In fact, there are two MG3A1 general-purpose machines on the Leopard 2, one coaxial machine gun, just to the left of the gun barrel. Another one is on the ring bracket of the loader's hatch, with an elevation range of -10 degrees to add 75 degrees, used for air defense. The range of elevation and low shooting is -10 degrees 75 degree, which means that the muzzle of this machine gun can point downward to a minimum angle of 10 degrees, and vice versa, it can be raised to a maximum angle of 75 degrees. It is said to be air defense, but in the real battlefield, this general machine can probably only drive away the enemy's light reconnaissance helicopters and even drones. It has almost no effect on enemies such as armed helicopters. Before, whether it was the Ghost AI, the four monsters, or even Ruger, they had never used this machine gun. The main reason was that if this machine gun was used, most of the body would be exposed outside the thick tank armor, which was a bit unsafe. At least with Ruger's shooting accuracy, as long as the monsters dared to use this machine gun, they would definitely be sniped by Ruger and others in the shortest time. So in the previous battle, the Ghost AI's coaxial machine guns were almost empty, and the roof machine guns were useless. As for Ruger, they really didn't even use the coaxial machine guns. The coaxial machine gun has an additional firing controller on the loader's side. Anya raised her foot forward and pressed it against the front wall of the cabin to step on it. The loader's foot stepping on the coaxial machine gun firing controller is also a traditional skill of this family. However, only Ruger knew about this, and the other two women were not aware of it. Ruger got the structural diagram of this tank when he recovered the Leopard 2A4 before. There were no high explosive bombs in the ammunition room at the moment, so Tia simply threw cluster grenades by herself, and the loader Anya had nothing to do. So Ruger simply instructed her to use his MG3A1 general-purpose machine gun. This was Anya's first time using the lost weapon. When she was helping with work in the second shelter, although she also watched the firearms training of the Human Resistance Army, she was not interested in firearms because of the pride of the Nephilim and, of course, the most important thing was her hatred for Tia. In addition, she is a mage, a natural long-range profession, so Ruger did not force her to learn how to use the lost weapons. But now, in this military camp, she also faces the same problem as the Bloody Countess before. There is no scattered magic in the surrounding space, and she can only rely on the magic in her body to condense magic. In this case, the magic that could be cast instantly before now has to be cast while standing and concentrating. She used to be able to cast a string of ice arrows, ice spears, and ice balls at will, but now with all the magic in her body, she can only cast a few magics at best. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 195. If we talk about the dislike of the environment without magic, mages rank second, and no one dares to rank first. But there is also a good thing, that is, under Ruger's remote voice guidance, Anya learned to use the machine gun very quickly. Even Tia, who was outside the cabin, couldn't help but exclaimed when she saw that she actually pulled the MG3 in front of her under Ruger's mere language guidance, stared at the butt of the gun and fired at the monster in front of her in a realistic manner. You have a strong learning ability. Luji's remote teaching tutorial can't be understood by ordinary people. You actually learned it directly from him. Amazing. Tia's words were obviously praising Anya, but Ruger felt more and more uncomfortable the more he listened. Why does it feel like most of it is complaining about himself? complaining about not teaching well, or not being able to teach. Tia, what you said. Ruger really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But he didn't know what to say after he said halfway. He also knew that the success rate of teaching others to shoot with language and words alone was not high. At the same time, he also saw the accuracy of Anya's few bursts of shooting just now. To be honest, if there was one of those guys in the human resistance army who could have Anya's skills, he wouldn't have to spend several days just to train them in shooting. The level of Anya's performance was indeed not low. There must be a reasonable explanation between the difference in teaching level and the strong performance of others. Although Anya didn't say anything, the corners of her mouth were already curled up. She was quite satisfied with her performance. But to be fair, this was neither because Ruger taught well nor because she learned quickly. It was really the result of years of exposure and the combined effect of talent. At this time, Anya found that her shooting talent was actually quite good, and listened to Tia and Ruger bickering and playing over there. In addition to being happy, she also felt warm. It seemed that she really felt like going home. After firing another burst of shots, Anya finally couldn't help but cheer. When Tia looked over, she simply shouted excitedly, "Let's see who kills more monsters." "What? You want to compete with me on this?" Tia was stunned when she heard the words, and then laughed out loud. "Ha, you are still too young, holding a large area with one blast, you sweep for a long time to only one." "Okay, I'll be your referee," Ruger suddenly interrupted. "Oh, and for fairness, little Tia, you can use your own pineapple, and the supply of cluster grenades will be suspended." "What? How can this be?" Tia was still dissatisfied, but she heard Anya next to her buzz 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 and buzz 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 already sweeping with the electric saw. "Wow, you are jumping the gun, foul foul!" Tia shouted. However, Ruger shouted at the same time, "The current score, Anya beats Tia, 2:0. He has the system record, so it's not too easy to calculate the score." Seeing that he had reported the score, Tia became even more uneasy. She stopped talking nonsense and hurriedly took out her small bag and threw it on the top of the turret, and took out a few homemade pineapple fragmentation bombs from it, and threw them at the group of monsters on the other side. 3:1. This is all about comparison. Even hunting a monster has to be a competition, and in the end there must be not enough monsters to score. Ruger, the one who fanned the flames, saw that the two of them were tied after clearing the surrounding monsters, and wanted to say a few nice words to end the fight. As a result, he was retorted by the two women at the same time. In the end, he could only obediently serve as the driver of the two, taking the two of them on the playground, and even wandering around the entire military camp area for scouts, and he killed all the monsters before he could rest. It's really true that the instigator has no descendants. As for the score, it was clear at the beginning, but the two were evenly matched. Anya started fast and had a long attack range, but she couldn't stand Tia's range attack when she was close. So as the fight went on, the score was always around the same. If not, Luger wouldn't be forced to keep running around. But when they left the playground and entered the camp, and started the street fighting, they almost always found one enemy at a corner and another at a corner. In this case, the two people's attacks were often synchronized, and it was impossible to tell who killed the monster. If Anya is a machine gun, the bullet flying speed must be faster than Tia's bomb. This is true, but the problem is that the monsters here cannot be killed with one bullet. In the end, whether it was killed by Anya's third or fourth round of bursts, or by Tia's dozens or hundreds of fragments, Luger couldn't tell at all. A draw, it can only be considered a draw. Someone aroused the competitive spirit of others, and in the end someone else claimed that their fight was a draw. The fate of this person can be imagined. When he drove the tank and brought the two women back to the vicinity of the rogues, even the four rogues almost pulled out their guns and shot him when they saw his lost face, thinking that he had been turned into a monster. After returning from this match of about half an hour, Rogue found that Sarah was still motionless. But unlike the initial lack of reaction, now she seemed to be concentrating on sorting out the sudden increase in knowledge in her mind, and she could actually sense the changes outside. She also found that it was safe outside, so she simply took this opportunity to directly enter the deep learning mode. According to HK417, she even said hello to the rogues, asking them to continue to help her protect the law, and also explain to Ruger and others. Ruger was not dissatisfied with this. He was just curious about how much information Sarah had obtained. If it was just to learn to drive a tank. Well, if the basic skills and basic knowledge of the driver, gunner, loader, and commander were all mastered, it seemed that half an hour was not enough. In this case, we can only wait. The competitive spirit of Anyadiya and the others was aroused by someone who wanted to earn more points, and now it is a bit difficult to retract. In the end, Ruger simply took out a military flag and let the two continue to fight. Although the momentum of the battle over there was not small, Ruger felt that the two people were enjoying it. The monsters were killed by them, and there was nothing to do on Ruger's side. Then, led by the HK-21 sister, the rogues simply surrounded Ruger and asked him to directly introduce the use of this tank to them. Just now, they saw this thing kill the bloody countess with one shot. Ruger was mysteriously excited about teaching these little girls from the dark world to see the technology of the Lost Ones. Seeing that they were eager to learn, he was more than happy to do it. He wanted to be a good instructor with the same enthusiasm as when he led the human resistance army. In fact, if the electronic system is put aside, and the mechanical and weapon principles are not taught, and only the simplest usage is taught, the task faced by the 4 crew members of the tank is not difficult to teach. It is not much more difficult than teaching how to drive a small car in a driving school. Anyway, they are not expected to pass the second subject test by driving a tank. Like the 2 people on Tia's side, the 5 people here also had a lot of fun. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start Draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 196. Halfway through the tutorial, MP5 girl suddenly said something, which immediately made the atmosphere strange. This thing is really good. It would be great if we also had one of these things to charge at the front line. As soon as she said this, the other 3 rogues immediately recalled that scene. The confrontation between the rogues and the army of monsters has always been a routine of using archers to overcome everything. The opponent's light infantry, fallen demons, fallen rogues rely on archers. The opponent's heavy infantry, zombies, skeletons, goat-headed people, rogues rely on archers. The opponent's cavalry/fast infantry, huge beasts, rogues rely on archers. The opponent's archers, fallen magicians, hard-haired rats, fallen rogue archers, skeleton archers, rogues still rely on archers. As a result, the rogues can only rely on trenches and grind with the opponent bit by bit. If the efficiency is high, they can fight back, but if the efficiency is low, they really have no choice but to retreat. The reason why the rogues were able to push the front line forward recently was because of Sarah. Sarah herself had the invulnerable Iron Man armor, so she could act as a cavalry, an arrowhead, and attack the monster battle formation. In addition, she also had that pet, and if she captured a giant beast of elite level, she would be a real heavy armored cavalry. With her charging, and the enemies charging large monsters being taken as pets in turn, it would be hard for the rogues not to win. However, it was precisely because of these experiences that the smarter rogues had discovered the necessity of heavy armored charging units in battle. There was even a voice that thought that the rogues should seek reconciliation with the paladin cult. After all, it seemed that if the 2 sides cooperated sincerely, the counterattack on the monster base camp would be just around the corner. Now, the four rogues had seen tanks up close, and of course their minds became active. A considerable number of the rogues themselves used the weapons of the Lost Ones, so it would not be a problem to use more. If tanks were used, wouldn't it be possible for the rogues to counter-attack the cathedral by themselves? The base camp of the monsters was the Cathedral of the Blind Sisterhood, the rogues' own cathedral. Although this generation had no feelings for that place, the elders of previous generations still wanted to recover the cathedral. Ruger wanted to pierce the rogue's fantasy, but when they gathered 4 pairs of watery eyes again to flirt with him and wanted him to promise to get them a tank, he really didn't dare to remain silent. "It's not that I don't want to do it for you, but it's useless to bring this thing to the ground. The environment there will make most of its equipment fail." Speaking of this, Ruger suddenly felt that it seemed to be asking for trouble to tell the kids about radiation or something, so he rolled his eyes and said, "Have you never seen similar Lost Ones technological creations appear on the ground? There haven't been any in so many years. That's why. If you can't explain it clearly, don't explain it. Just use real-life examples to save trouble." Hearing what he said, the 4 rogue girls who were just super excited, their faces drooped again. Seeing them like this, Ruger couldn't help scratching his scalp, and turned his head to see the cars that had stopped not far away. After thinking for a while, he simply called the 4 people and took them to an Inuk light armored patrol car, saying, "If it's this thing, it should be possible to pull it back to the ground for you. And there can be more than one." Using light armored patrol cars instead of tanks, he was quite creative. But to be honest, if we only look at the needs of the rogues, if there are 4 or 5 of these guys, it seems that the role of a tank is not much different. Although this thing is a light armored vehicle, the armor effect is also good. The vehicle is delivered according to the second level of NATO Standard Agreement 4569. In this agreement, the danger of enemy firepower is roughly divided into 5 levels from light to heavy. The first level is rifles, mainly the level of shooting at 30 meters away with 2 standard rifle bullets from NATO, including 556 small caliber and 762 medium caliber full power bullets. The second level standard is military rifles, facing the enemy AK series medium caliber intermediate power bullets armor piercing incendiary bullets, API, at 30 meters away. And the fragments of 155 mm heavy artillery grenades exploded at 80 meters. The third level is the sniper rifle level, which protects against the attack of full power rifle bullets and armor piercing bullets at 30 meters away. And the fragments of 155 mm heavy artillery grenades exploded at 60 meters. The fourth level is for heavy machine guns, which protect against armor-piercing incendiary shells, 5 x 114 mm caliber, fired by heavy machine guns at a distance of 200 meters, and fragments from 155 mm heavy artillery grenades at a distance of 30 meters. The fifth level is for machine guns, which protect against 25 x 137 mm caliber armor-piercing discarding sabot shells, APST, at a distance of 500 meters, and fragments from 155 mm heavy artillery grenades at a distance of 25 meters. It is said that a sixth level was added to the standard later, which does not exist in the original data and the source is unknown. The standard is to protect against 30 mm machine gun armor-piercing shells at a distance of 500 meters and fragments from 155 mm heavy artillery grenades at a distance of 10 meters. If you can really reach the sixth level, you will almost have to be at the level of a main battle tank. Ruger calculated that among the weapons he has handled, those that have reached the first level can be considered armored vehicles. Reaching the second level is a good armored patrol vehicle. The third level, the local Fennec armored reconnaissance vehicle, has this level of protection. The fourth level corresponds to armored personnel carriers / APCs. For example, the famous local Boxer multi-purpose armored vehicle. The fifth level corresponds to a real infantry fighting vehicle IFV. At the sixth level, it is really the level of a heavy infantry fighting vehicle or even a tank. It seems that compared with the Leopard 2A4, this little Inuk seems a little bit inferior, but if you look at the enemy's firepower, it seems to be enough. Inuk is the raccoon dog in the language of this European country. It is the raccoon dog of the same kind. There is also a name called raccoon dog. Just by listening to the name, you know that this thing is probably an alien species here. It's like tomatoes and potatoes in Chinese. They are all based on something that exists locally to describe new things. Although the raccoon dog is worse than a fox and better than a jackal in the Chinese context, it is generally negative. But for the sake of his fellow countrymen, when Ruger knew that Inuk was actually it, he immediately had an inexplicable liking for this series of armored vehicles. The local armored forces of this country have raised a nest of animals, from World War II to modern times. Probably only a few species such as PZH 2000 do not belong to the category of zoos. Some people once translated the Boxer multi-purpose armored vehicle into Boxer, thinking that this is not an animal name, but the name Boxer is the name of a dog. The English name of the dog itself is Boxer, which literally translates to boxer, and later it was translated into Boxer. In Ruger's opinion, if the raccoon armored vehicle is really used by ROG, the remote weapon station must be dismantled and a heavy machine gun or grenade launcher must be directly installed there. Directly put another MG3 general purpose machine gun on the hood, controlled by the co-pilot. 2 machine guns, multiplied by 4 to 5 vehicles, under this firepower, the long-range attack means of the monsters will basically be firmly suppressed. The arrows of the skeleton archers, the fallen rogue archers, and the thorns of the hard-haired rats are not many, and their level is far from the level of the armor-piercing bullets of the full-power rifle bullets. That is something that can deal with a nightmare monster with 2 shots, although it can only be used to attack the vital parts. So, using the raccoon as an armored vehicle for the rogues to charge into battle is actually not a big problem. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 197. But when Ruger disassembled the thing, he found that the task was not as easy as he thought. Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow. It's not because this thing is backward, but because it is too advanced. The Leopard 2 tank cannot be used on the ground because the electronic chips will be damaged by magic radiation. The problem is that the foundation of the Raccoon armored vehicle is the G-Series off-road vehicle of Mercedes-Benz. In addition to the car navigation radio DVD, this thing itself also has a large number of electronic chips on the vehicle itself. For example, various sensors, such as the check engine light on the dashboard, an ABS anti-lock braking system, etc. Fortunately, Mercedes-Benz is a local old-fashioned company after all, which means that they participated in World War II. So Ruger actually has their previous designs. Drawing on the technology of the old masters in World War II, he can still remove the electronic chips on this car, or let the car still drive on the basis of their damage. However, the workload was a bit large, so Ruger planned to open a car repair shop there after returning to the shelter. In addition, Tia's alchemy workshop, which theoretically provided them with fuel and ammunition, was right next to them, so it was really a one-stop service. Ruger's family was about to successfully start their own arms dealer business in the apocalypse. The plan to do long-term arms business with the ROGs took shape in Ruger's mind, so the next step was how to make it happen. So after dismantling the autonomous driving system and remote weapon station of the Ghost AI, he gave the LAP, light armored patrol vehicle, to the 4 ROGs as a toy. Anyway, they had just learned how to drive a tank, and switching to a simpler armored vehicle would only make them learn faster. After a while, Ruger restored 4 laps for each of them to practice driving on the playground. Then he took away the 5th one, watching Tia and Anya play military chess while picking up the electronic chips on the car. This was his first time dismantling a vehicle outside the logistics space. Dismantling a car with bare hands is indeed a unique experience. He was having a great time when someone asked him, "What are you doing?" He answered casually, dismantling the chip. As soon as he finished speaking, he realized something was wrong and looked over. Sure enough, it was Sarah, who had been silent before. "Hey, are you done over there?" Ruger asked hurriedly. Almost Sarah nodded, then looked at the two girls playing chess, and then looked at the four Rogers who almost turned the armored vehicle into a bumper car in the distance, and said to Ruger, "What on earth is this?" Ruger felt like a normal school student who went to a primary school for internship to play with primary school students, and the name of edutainment was just right when the parents of the students came to visit the school. As a result, he was caught by the parents while he was playing with other people's children. Embarrassing, but not ordinary embarrassment. He wanted to explain, but didn't know where to start. Fortunately, Roger saw Sarah wake up and hurriedly came over to chatter and ask questions. The noise here made the two women playing chess unable to continue their game, and finally decided to wait for another day. After a while of chattering, everyone finally made the previous situation clear. "So, you want to dismantle the electronic chips so that these lost chariots can also be used on the ground?" Sarah suddenly realized, and then said, "In fact, the Ghost has a way to drive that kind of chariot to the ground. They can shield the so-called magic radiation." "What? A stone stirred up 1,000 waves?" Ruger never thought that a big problem he was about to study would now have hope of being solved. Could it be that the Bloody Countess has this technology in her memory? Yes, Sarah nodded and replied, "But she doesn't know the principle, and I can't understand it. It is the Ghost core controlled by her that can do it." Soon, Sarah told everyone the relevant information she got from the Bloody Countess. Ruger also figured out a vague weirdness before. The Bloody Countess has a strong magical radiation. Now it seems that it is because of her existence that the Shadow Link's Old Noisy cannot sneak into the Leopard 2A6 directly. But such a strong magical radiation that can keep Old Noisy out should theoretically be enough to damage the electronic chips on the tank. But judging from the capabilities of the Leopard 2A6, the working capabilities of its various electronic modules seem to be quite normal, far more efficient than the old tanks in the World War II era that did not have electronic chips to improve efficiency. So Ruger felt it was a bit strange before. How did the Leopard 2A6 manage to repel Old Noisy's infiltration on the one hand, while its own electronic equipment can still work normally on the other hand? According to the memory of the Bloody Count recounted by Sarah, this is because all the electronic equipment of the Leopard 2A6 are connected together and controlled by the same weird AI. That weird AI is the weird leader who came to the Lost Human camp to conduct ambush operations under the control of the Bloody Countess. A strange leader-level AI that specializes in automatic robots, similar to the strange Dungeon E52, but with completely different characteristics. These strange AIs have physical properties that are no longer just a set of computer programs. To some extent, they are already a new species of life. Ruger always said that Old Noisy was suspected to be an electronic life form, but it only has some characteristics that match. On the other hand, the strange AI is more like a thoroughgoing electronic life form. The one captured by the Bloody Countess has a method to resist the invasion of magic energy. Otherwise, they will be in a dead end facing the spread of magic energy in the dark world. And when it exists as the main control AI in a complete set of electronic circuits, all the components in this electronic circuit will also gain the ability to resist magic radiation under the protection of its electronic body. Being able to resist magic radiation, this method can also resist nuclear radiation and even electromagnetic pulses. 3 criteria for defining life. First, it has stable mass and energy metabolism functions. Simply put, it can eat, stretch, and grow. Second, it can respond to stimuli. Roughly equivalent to being able to seek benefits and avoid harm. Third, it can reproduce. The strange ACE meet the first and second criteria, but there is currently insufficient evidence for the third one. They seem to be able to create offspring through the mother body, but compared with the mother body, the offspring's abilities in all aspects are very different. It is hard to say that this method can be used for stable multi-generation reproduction. However, because of this, as a quasi-life form, they gradually develop the ability to resist the radiation of the dark world in contact with its magic, which is also very logical. Even if we trace the source and see that the ghost AI is actually the essence of the weapon used by the rebellious AI Noah to slaughter the lost humans, then we should understand that as a weapon tool for ethnic cleansing, they will change their characteristics according to the situation, which is also reasonable. Therefore, Ruger quickly accepted Sarah's explanation. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Ai Chiji. Chapter 198. But soon, he discovered another problem from Sarah's words. Wait, he turned his head to look at the wreckage of the Leopard 2A6 in the distance to the west. You mean, that strange AI is on that tank? Sarah nodded, yes. Ruger was already very upset because he thought of many things, but seeing Sarah still taking her time, he gradually calmed down. What's going on? Aren't you worried that the ghost AI will start the tank again? Although under normal circumstances, after being hit by 2 consecutive armor-piercing shells, the damage caused by the broken piercing rod fragments alone can make most of the functions of the tank ineffective. But, after all, it is a ghost AI, and it is hard to say what the backup plan is. But you are not worried, why? Ha, you found out. Sarah looked like her prank was exposed, and chuckled. Okay, since you found out, I will tell you directly. Remember I told you before that the Bloody Countess captured the ghost and then used it to control the tanks. I haven't told you what means she used yet. Well, it's actually similar to the means you used to deal with the commander in the ghost cave, controlling its connection with other equipment. Ruger caught the E-52 commander in the ghost dungeon. He let it transfer its consciousness to a device, unplugged the network cable of the device, turned off the Wi-Fi, and made it the consciousness prison of the E-52 ghost AI. Sarah was also there at the time, so she said this. Bloody Mary's method is similar, Sarah continued. Her method is simpler and more brutal. She uses her bloody magic. She uses bloody magic to control the external communication interface of the ghost AI. In this way, the ghost cannot completely transfer itself to other devices through this interface. At the same time, it can connect to other systems that Bloody Mary wants it to enter through this interface. It's equivalent to her using bloody magic to make a collar for the ghost, and there is a corrosive magic on the collar. She can use that collar to kill the ghost with abnormal movements at any time. So that ghost can only be controlled by her. I see. Ruger finally understood it now. He even figured out why there was such a relationship between the ghost AI and the Bloody Countess monster, with the ghost AI being the main monster and the ghost AI being the tool. To be honest, it was similar to his usual method. That is to say, the main equipment of the ghost AI is still on the tank. Ruger thought about it and said again. But, without the bloody magic control of the Bloody Countess, it not only did not regain its freedom, but even lost the ability to connect with the outside world. Yes, Sarah nodded, it was the Bloody Mary's magic that was the bridge. She died, the magic effect disappeared, and the bridge was gone. Although Ruger was not worried that the Leopard 2A6 would suddenly come alive and turn around to shoot him and others, he was more eager to run over to check. In the previous battle, this thing was later retreating, escape, and retreating, running, to the west after Tia killed the driver and gunner in succession, and had to be abandoned by the Bloody Countess. The 4 crew members left the vehicle either physically or consciously, but it still moved forward for a long distance under the multiple effects of the engine and inertia. So compared to the location where Sarah and others were when they dealt with the Bloody Countess, the Leopard 2A6 was further west. As a result, when Ruger went to the east to recover 3 self-propelled howitzers, he did not recover this thing at the same time. Later, when he took the 2 women to search and kill monsters, he was unable to take care of other things because of the two women's fighting spirit. The last reasonable opportunity to recover it was when the Forog got the raccoon armored vehicle. However, when he found that the MP5 girl who drove the first raccoon armored vehicle out for a stroll had treated the tank wreckage as an obstacle and was doing all kinds of fancy circling around the pole, he simply left the thing for the Rog sisters to play with. At that time, he had no idea that his behavior of pampering his sister would actually allow a big bomb that could explode at any time to be left in the bumper car playground. Of course, according to Sarah, this big bomb would not explode at all, because the detonator fuse had been removed, and the insensitive explosive inside theoretically could no longer explode. But Ruger was still a little scared. He figured out the cause and effect, and hurried to the Leopard 2A6, climbed to the top of the turret, and jumped directly into the commander's hatch. He checked the almost undamaged onboard electronic systems near the commander bit by bit, and finally found an electronic chip that looked like a USB flash drive on the main control computer of the commander's command information system. The socket that connected the USB flash drive to the computer, as Sarah said, had been damaged by more than half. On the remaining part, there were strange blood stains. The reason why it was weird was not only because blood should not appear on this electronic chip, but also because of the state of these blood stains themselves. They did not look like blood stains that were accidentally stained, but more like ice cubes that were frozen into ice and embedded in the damaged socket, completing the damaged socket in form. So that's it? This is the blood magic that the bloody Countess used to control it? Muttering to himself, Ruger didn't bother jumping out. He directly issued a recovery command inside the vehicle and recovered the wreckage of the Leopard 2A6 into the logistics space. At the same time, he also got the complete 3D construction diagram of the tank. This included the construction diagram of the vehicle control system that was forcibly connected together. After being pierced twice by Tia with a tungsten alloy rod, the tank was actually unable to drive. It can move, but before repairs, it is almost impossible to adjust any driving posture. In human terms, the engine can start, run, and move forward at the lowest speed, but it cannot shift gears to speed up, reverse, or turn. Tia's two shots, the first shot killed the driver, and the tungsten alloy rod also destroyed a considerable part of the cockpit equipment, so there was the above problem. And her second shot first pierced the commander bloody Countess in the high back row, and then shot and killed the gunner in the low front row. Therefore, the equipment on the rear commander's seat was not seriously damaged, but the fire control and sighting equipment on the front gunner's seat were almost all damaged by the aftereffects of the piercing rod. The tungsten alloy piercing rod itself is strong enough. When it penetrates the turret from the rear armor, its structure will not change much. In addition to the piercing rod itself, the most after-effect provider is the armor extruded from the rear armor of the turret pierced by the piercing rod. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start Draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 199. Take steel armor as an example. If this armor piece is penetrated by a piercing rod, the penetrated part of the steel will be squeezed forward by the piercing rod. The tungsten alloy piercing rod is strong, but this part of the squeezed steel armor has similar characteristics to fragments. They will cause certain damage to the turret. However, don't forget that the piercing rod penetrated the bloody Countess first after penetrating the armor. So what about the part of the rear armor that was squeezed out before the piercing rod? Most of them also hit the Countess. It's a pity that their energy is not high, and it is likely that they were eroded by the blood erosion magic carried by the bloody Countess. The piercing rod continued to move forward, penetrated the Countess and then penetrated another crew member. At this time, a large part of its kinetic energy has been consumed. If it flies forward again, it will be difficult to penetrate the front armor of the turret. Instead, it is likely to stay in the turret. In this way, its remaining kinetic energy will all remain in the turret, or it will break into fragments, or hit the equipment structure in front of the gunner, relying on the impact to use the fragile equipment fragments as raw materials to create high-speed fragments. These fragments will hit the gunner and other equipment. So the equipment on the gunner's position is the most severely damaged. In general, as shown by a lot of actual combat experience, the after effect of modern tail-stabilized armor-piercing projectiles is unstable, which can make the tank show a high probability of losing some combat effectiveness, but the probability of it being completely damaged is low. In comparison, Tia was able to kill 2 crew members with 2 shots, more because she, the gunner, was strong enough, and their entire crew was actually bullying. This result has both advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantage is that if the Ghost AI was not controlled by the Bloody Countess, and after the Bloody Countess was killed, it also lost its ability to counterattack, otherwise this Leopard 2A6 actually retained a high degree of mobility, enough to pose a fatal threat to Ruger and others. The advantage is that Ruger does not need to buy much extra equipment, and it only takes a little time to repair this Leopard 2A6. If he can learn from the method of the Ghost AI to defend against magic radiation, maybe he can really upgrade his shotguns and drive a Leopard 2A6 in the dark world. I dare not say anything else, at least ordinary monsters will not be a match for this beast. So after a few seconds, without the support of the car body, Ruger, and the broken fragments in the car body that have not been recovered by the logistics space all fell in the air. The fragments dinged for a while, and Ruger easily bent his legs slightly to relieve the falling force and landed steadily on the ground. At the same time, the rogues who were curiously watching the tank outside simply surrounded him. Seeing that he was holding the USB-like thing in his hand, the rogues looked at him curiously. But when Sarah walked in and saw the thing, she couldn't help but give him a thumbs up. As expected of you, you found it so easily. Yes, this is the real body of the strange AI leader. What are you going to do? Ruger thought, what else can he plan? Of course, feed the cat. He just smiled at Sarah, and waved in the direction of Tia, asking Old Noisy, who was already lying on the shoulder of the bomb girl again, to come over and eat this thing. Old Noisy was now trained by him to be more like a dog than a cat. Seeing his gesture, he immediately ran over, almost bumping into several rogues who were blocking in front of him. Ruger was a little curious, wondering if he could pass through like a ghost if he ran into Rogue and other quasi-Nephilim. As a result, when Old Noisy was about to fly to Sarah, Ruger saw her bending her head and looking at HK-417's sister as if she remembered something. While whispering to her, Sarah just avoided the old chatterbox who was flying in a straight line. Coincidence? Seeing this, Ruger was somewhat puzzled, and subconsciously paid special attention to Sarah's expression. As a result, at the moment when the old chatterbox entered the USB drive, he seemed to see Sarah glance at the USB drive inadvertently with the corner of her eye. What's going on? Ruger initially guessed that he was dazzled. However, the system was very warm at this time and repeated the picture he just saw. This is another additional function brought by his total score breaking through the 10,000 mark. When the trigger condition is triggered, the visual has a video effect. The trigger condition can be set by yourself, and the default is a high concentration of mind. In the picture, Sarah's eyes are clearly visible, and she is looking at the old chatterbox. Sarah can see the Shadow Link's old chatterbox. What does this mean? Thinking about it now, she seemed to have something similar in the ghost dungeon, and could see the performance of Old Noisy. It was just that Lugger failed to get direct evidence that time. Was she able to see Old Noisy after being transformed by Iron Man or after she subdued the Radom worm? Or could she see it from the beginning? In any case, she was consciously hiding her ability. Why? Was this a trump card she reserved for herself? To deal with Tia one day? In any case, Lugger felt that he was right to be a little wary of Sarah. It was also necessary to find a way to make Tia gradually be more careful with her. However, no matter what, this matter could not be exposed now. As long as this doubt exists, she will reveal more clues in the future in order to prevent others from discovering this. But if she points it out now, she can have a lot of reasons to completely eliminate the impact of this matter. For example, she can say that she vaguely saw a shadow after obtaining the memory of the Bloody Countess. She just looked at it subconsciously, thinking that she was dazzled, and didn't care. It was only after being reminded that she realized that it was Old Noisy. Ruger can make up 3 such excuses in 1 minute. In this case, if she wants to pretend, Ruger will pretend not to see it and accompany her to pretend. On the other hand, after Old Noisy entered the small USB flash drive, it ate the strange AI inside again. This time, it got even more useful information than the last time it ate E52. However, because of Sarah's presence, Ruger didn't ask him to tell what he knew immediately. Instead, he took out a laptop and some repair equipment, repaired the USB flash drive physically, and plugged it into the laptop. This thing had been seen by Ruger before, when he used it as a drone controller. Last time, he also used this thing as a cover for Old Noisy to control the drone, and this time it was used in a similar way. Ruger used the computer to read the memory of the strange AI directly from the USB flash drive. This is impossible in practical operation. If the strange AI was still alive, Ruger's laptop would be occupied by it as a new body. But he was the only one who understood computer technology among all the people present, so he could make up such things. The information displayed on the laptop was all selectively repeated by him after he communicated with Old Noisy in the computer through typing. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shanmao Ai Chiji. Chapter 200. The whole process can even be done with a notepad program. Searched can on Google. But in order to appear more mysterious, Ruger even moved out VC++. Under the Lugger remote control, Laoneo-ko selectively displayed not much information, and the text used was still Chinese characters. Except for Tia, who learned a little bit from Ruger, no one else knew this kind of writing at all. Oh, it seems that Anya has some reaction to some of the individual words, maybe there are some corresponding word blocks in her grandmother's belongings. Therefore, the confidentiality work jointly carried out by Lugger and Laoneo-ko was very successful. Of course, they did feedback a lot of useful information. The charming AI left a lot of useful information. The first point is the original identity of this Ruins of the Lost. This is actually an important station of the Mountain Special Operations Battalion that Lugger saw in the sewer, which fought head-on with the insect monsters and was unfortunately annihilated. It's just that what survived the impact of the world fragments and became the Ruins of the Lost is not all of the original residents, but only a part. This also explains why the remaining combat vehicles here are seriously unsystematic. According to the Ruger timeline, under normal circumstances the army here should only have Leopard 2A6 and not Leopard 2A4. The former is actually an upgrade from the latter. However, the total amount of equipment of the latter is large, and not all of them have been upgraded to the level of the former. A considerable part of them have remained in Leopard 2A4 status and been sold to other countries. As luck would have it, several Leopard 2A4s sold to neighboring countries were shipped back here due to a cooperative upgrade plan, with the intention of returning after further original factory upgrades. In the process of transit, the end of the world has arrived. The Jui AI led some automatic robots that could invade machinery to sneak in here, and cooperated with Jui in the sewers to solve the biggest threat to Jui within a radius of hundreds of kilometers. That is, this Mountain Special Operations Camp. The sewer's charm lures the enemy deep into the sewer, and the automatic robot comes to draw fire from the bottom of the cauldron. So long before the fragments of the Dark World fell, the garrison here had been completely captured by Sui-mei. However, because Jimei is the attacker, their ability to actually expand their troops is limited by the supplies here. After the fragments of the Dark World arrived and buried a considerable part of the station underground, the mysterious automatic robot manufacturing production line was even more severely affected. During its recovery process, after a battle that was neither long nor short, it finally fell into the hands of the Bloody Countess, the leader of monsters. After sorting out the memory information of Wei Mei AI, Lugger discovered another very interesting thing. Unlike the charming AI leader E52 in the mysterious dungeon, the charming AI leader here has never captured the townspeople of Rogtown. Its knowledge of the fragments of the Dark World, the invasion of hell, demons and monsters, and the Nephilim all come from the line of the Bloody Countess. Although the Bloody Countess revealed some key information to it after capturing it, its understanding of the entire world is still incomplete. For example, it really believed that the existence of the Bloody Countess appeared after the world of the lost itself was invaded by the alien plane of hell. In its mind, there is only one kind of human being, that is, the human beings from the lost world, and there is no concept of the human beings from the dark world. Therefore, it has no doubts about why the Bloody Countess was able to restrain it through magic and knows how to corrode its chip interface so that it cannot escape control. It believes that it is logical and blameless for the lost humans to develop this skill after learning magic from the hell plane. But this seemed very strange to Ruger. The Bloody Countess should be a native of the Dark World, whether from the background story of the original game or from the memories of the residents of Rogtown from ancient times. How could she be so familiar with electronic information technology, especially electronic hardware technology? Even this level of familiarity is only the first-year general education course in University Science and Engineering, Basics of Computer Information Technology. I won't have an answer to this question, but there is a place where it probably does. In the memory of the Bloody Countess. However, if it was Tia or Anya who had the memory of the Bloody Countess, Lugger would immediately go over and ask. But it was Sarah who mastered this thing. If you ask her, will she tell the truth? Lugger then remembered another sentence, how will you know if you don't try? Under normal circumstances, once the Bloody Countess is killed, these things will disappear into the air forever and will never be explored again. Now Sarah can save the memory of the Bloody Countess through her own means, which is an unexpected surprise in itself. Since it should not be available in the first place, but now there is a 1% chance, why not try? Isn't the worst outcome just to get nothing? It's not the original result, it's not that bad. The result of not trying is 0 points. The result of taking the test may be 0 or full marks. Obviously the benefits are higher if you try it, so why not? Thinking this, Lugger paused while typing on the keyboard, then turned to look at Sarah. He was about to ask about that, but when he saw Sarah's face, a flash of lightning suddenly exploded in his mind, making him think of another thing in an instant. Assuming that the Bloody Countess is from the Dark World, where did she get her knowledge of computer information technology? Self-taught? What if she has the ability to obtain the knowledge of the humans she captured? Just like Sarah? Wait, no. Sarah can absorb the knowledge of other monsters because of the Radom worms. Radom worms are the gifts of the sacred tree given to them by the god believed by the Ghost Clan. This has nothing to do with monsters. No. Radom worms have the ability to control other people's minds, this is certain. But whether they have the ability to absorb the host's memory and transfer it to its superiors is not certain. Although the former can be done in theory, it would not be too troublesome to do the latter. They are like two adjacent fruits on the same technology tree. Most of the front-end technology roots overlap. However, this is only theoretically, and there is no actual evidence. With the current research progress of the Ruger Logistics Space Biological Laboratory, it is impossible to obtain relevant evidence in less than 10 years. Then, is there another possibility? The ability to absorb the host's memory is not inherent in the Radom worm, but given by its new owner? Thinking of this, Ruger even shuddered unconsciously. His association almost equated Blood Crow Sarah, a current battlefield commander of Rogue, with the Bloody Countess. The undead demon resurrected by the Queen of Pain Andariel is likely to have a rogue background. This is like saying that the main force against the Nazis in World War II, a certain country on the other side of the ocean, was also Nazi. Wait, this example. Why does it seem more solid?